Welcome to our deep dive. We're going to explore ecosystems, but not just like taking a walk in the woods. We're
Mhm.
looking at them as complex adaptive systems,
Yeah, it's a different way of looking at nature, not just a static picture, but like a process that's always changing.
more like a movie than a
Yeah.
photograph.
Yeah.
But before we go any further, maybe we should start with what exactly is a system? I mean, what do we even mean by that?
Well, think of it as a bunch of different parts all connected,
Hmm.
and they work together to make something bigger, like the human body. It's a system, right?
Okay, so the heart, lungs, all that.
Exactly. The
Yep.
heart pumps blood, the lungs, they take in oxygen, the brain controls it all. Each part does its own thing, but they need each other to work.
Right, so it's the connections that make it all function.
Exactly.
Hmm. So, okay, that's like a biological system. What about something more everyday? Would something like a local farmer's market be a system?
Oh, absolutely. You've got the farmers selling their stuff, people buying, money changing hands, maybe even some music playing. It all creates like an experience.
Right, made up of all those individual parts.
Exactly, that's a system. But ecosystems aren't just any system, they're complex adaptive systems.
Hmm.
And that makes them even more interesting.
Okay, so complex adaptive. What's so special about them? What sets them apart?
Well, first of all, they've got lots of different parts
Yeah.
constantly interacting, and those parts are super connected. So a change in one part, it can like ripple through the whole thing.
Like a domino effect.
Yeah, but more like a really intricate dance. And here's what gets really cool. Feedback loops.
Feedback loops. Okay, I'm not sure I followed.
So every action has a consequence,
Right.
and that consequence it influences the next action. And you get these cycles of cause and effect.
Okay. Can you give me an example, like in an ecosystem? How would that work?
Sure. Imagine a predator, like a wolf, right? And its prey, maybe deer.
Okay, I'm with you.
So say the wolf population, it grows. More wolves means more pressure on the deer, so their numbers start to go down. But with fewer deer, the wolves start having trouble finding food, and their numbers drop too. It's this back and
And
forth.
it balances itself out naturally.
Yeah, exactly.
This complex adaptive thing is starting to make sense.
And as those pieces interact, something really amazing happens. We call it emergent behavior. Basically, the whole system does things that you wouldn't expect just by looking at the individual parts.
Emergent behavior. It sounds almost magical.
It kind of is. Think of a flock of birds.
Right.
Each bird, it's just reacting to the birds around it and to the environment. But together, they move in these amazing patterns. You couldn't predict those patterns just by studying one bird.
That's a great example. So we've got diverse components, they're all interconnected, feedback loops, and then this emergent behavior.
Mm.
Anything else that makes these systems unique?
Oh, yeah. The last big thing is they evolve over time. Ecosystems, they don't just react to things, they actually change their fundamental makeup. Species adapt, relationships shift, and the whole system gets stronger.
Okay, so we've got the basics of complex adaptive systems down. Now, our sources really dive into three main types of ecosystems: forests, oceans, and deserts. Let's start with forests. I mean, they're often called the lungs of the planet, right?
Yeah, and they're full of life. The trees, the undergrowth, all kinds of insects, birds in the canopy, mammals on the ground. But there's a whole hidden world under the surface, too.
You mean like the decomposers, all those fungi and bacteria
Yeah.
breaking down, the dead stuff.
Exactly. They're the recyclers. They break down the leaves, the wood, even animal carcasses,
Yeah.
and they put those nutrients back into the soil. Without them, the forest would be, well, a mess.
So it's all about connections, from the biggest trees to the smallest microbes.
Yeah, it's all a balance.
What about oceans? They seem so vast and mysterious.
Oh, they are. They cover over 70% of the planet. And there's life everywhere, from the surface to the deepest parts. And in that huge space, you've got all these different ecosystems, each one unique.
And one of the most interesting, but also the most at risk, is the coral reef ecosystem, right?
Sadly, yes. Coral reefs are beautiful, but they're also really fragile. They're built by these tiny animals, coral polyps, but they need a very specific set of conditions to survive: the right water temperature, sunlight, and certain types of algae.
So any of that changes, the whole ecosystem could, like, collapse.
Yeah, and we're seeing that now. With coral bleaching, it's mostly because of rising ocean temperatures. It shows how connected we are to these systems and how what we do, it has consequences.
That's a sobering thought. Okay, so we've got forests, oceans, both teeming with life. What about deserts? They're often seen as, barren wastelands, but I'm guessing there's more to them than meets the eye.
Oh, definitely. Deserts are thriving ecosystems. It's just that they've adapted to, well, a different set of challenges: extreme heat, limited water, not much vegetation. But life always finds a way.
Can you give me a cool example of how life survives in the desert?
Well, the desert tortoise is a classic. They've got this amazing adaptation, a bladder that can hold water for months, like a walking water bottle.
Wow. So even in the toughest places, life adapts and thrives.
Exactly. Desert plants have these deep roots to find water, and a lot of the animals are nocturnal, so they avoid the heat of the day. It really shows how resilient life is. It's not just individual species, though, right? Like whole ecosystems have evolved to survive in these harsh places, the Sahara, the Arctic, you name it. It really makes you think about what ecosystem really means. Like, it's not just a word, it's about how connected everything is and how tough life can be.
It's true. Those survival strategies, they really show how everything depends on everything else.
Exactly. And if you think about the whole planet, right, it's like all these ecosystems are linked together. Our source material, it talks about Earth having like four main spheres: the atmosphere, the hydrosphere, the geosphere, and the biosphere. And it says they're all interwoven, like a giant dance.
Okay, so break that down for me. Atmosphere is the air, hydrosphere is the water, geosphere is the rocks and land, and biosphere is all the living stuff.
Right. You got it. And the crazy thing is, they're not like separate, they're always interacting. That's what keeps life going.
So it's like one giant planetary complex adaptive system.
You could say that.
Can you give me like a concrete example
Yeah.
of how these spheres are connected?
Sure. Think about the water cycle. We all learned about it, right? But it's pretty amazing when you think about it. So
Mhm.
water evaporates from the oceans and lakes. That's the hydrosphere and atmosphere working together. That water vapor, it forms clouds. Then you get rain or snow that falls back to earth, affects the geosphere, and it gives water to plants and animals. That's the biosphere. And then eventually all that water flows back into the oceans. The cycle starts again.
It really is like a perfectly choreographed dance. Each sphere has its part to play.
Absolutely.
What about the exchange of gases between plants and animals? Is that another example of this connection?
Oh, for sure. Plants take in carbon dioxide, right,
Yeah.
from the atmosphere, and they release oxygen. And then we breathe in that oxygen and breathe out carbon dioxide. It's like a perfect partnership.
It really shows how we're all part of this intricate system. I mean, we breathe the air, we drink the water, we literally depend on these spheres to live.
Exactly. It's not just about like knowing facts, it's about realizing we're connected to nature and that we have to take care of it.
Okay, so we've zoomed out to the whole planet. Now let's zoom back in to those ecosystems. How do they actually work as these complex adaptive systems?
Well, one of the key things is food webs. They show how all the organisms in an ecosystem are linked. So you've got the plants, they're the producers, they capture energy from the sun. Then you've got the herbivores, they eat the plants. Then you've got the carnivores, they eat the herbivores. And then at the end, you've got the decomposers. They break down all the dead stuff and put the nutrients back into the soil. It's this constant flow of energy and nutrients.
It's like a delicate balancing act. Everyone has their role to play.
Yeah. And what happens if one part of that web gets messed up? That's where the feedback loops come in.
Oh, right, like the wolf and deer example.
Exactly. So, say a disease kills off a bunch of wolves. The deer, they might start multiplying like crazy, but then too many deer, they eat too much, and that can hurt the plants. And then eventually, there might not be enough food for all the deer. It's always adjusting, trying to stay balanced.
Which makes me think about biodiversity, right? Like the more diverse an ecosystem is, the more checks and balances it has, the more resilient it is.
You're absolutely right. Diversity is key. It means more ways for energy and nutrients to flow. So if one species disappears, another one might be able to take its place. But if there's not much diversity, the whole system is much more fragile.
So it's not just about saving, the cute animals. It's about keeping the whole ecosystem stable.
Precisely. Biodiversity is essential. If we want these systems to keep working the way they should, it's not just about the number of species either. A healthy ecosystem, it needs different types of habitats, different conditions. The more variety there is, the more niches there are for different species, makes the whole web of life stronger.
This is really making me see how complex these ecosystems are
Yeah.
and how everything's in balance. It's like a puzzle with a million pieces.
Yeah, and we're just starting to figure out how they all fit together. But one thing we do know is we got to protect these systems, not just for nature's sake, but for our own.
So where do we even start? I mean, how do we make sure these ecosystems are healthy with all the challenges they're facing?
Well, I think it starts with being aware, like realizing that what we do every day, it has an impact. The food we eat, the stuff we buy, it all affects the environment.
So like being a conscious consumer.
Exactly. Look for products that are, sustainably made with
Yeah.
less packaging. Support companies that care about the environment. Even small changes can add up when a lot of people do them.
Right. It's like a collective effort. What about things we can do at home,
Yeah.
just in our daily lives?
Saving energy is huge. Using energy efficient appliances, taking public transport or biking instead of driving, even turning off the lights when you leave a room, it all makes a difference.
What about water conservation? I know droughts are becoming a bigger problem
Yeah.
in a lot of places.
Oh, yeah. Water's super important. We got to be careful with it. Taking shorter showers helps. Fixing leaky faucets. Maybe even planting drought-tolerant plants in your garden. And being mindful of, like, your water footprint overall. Did you know that making one hamburger, it takes thousands of liters of water?
Wow, I had no idea it was that much. So what we eat, it really does matter for the environment.
Big time. Eating less meat, especially red meat, that can really reduce your impact. And when you do eat meat, look for sustainably raised options and, supporting local farmers markets, choosing organic when you can, and not wasting food, eating what you buy, composting scraps, that all helps too.
So it sounds like, yeah, individual actions are important.
Yeah.
We also need like bigger changes in the system itself.
Absolutely. We need our leaders to make policies that protect the environment,
Right.
like that encourage sustainability, support organizations that are working to conserve ecosystems, and fight climate change. Use your voice, use your vote to make those changes happen.
So it's kind of multi-pronged approach.
Yeah.
What we do as individuals, the choices we make as consumers, and then pushing for systemic change.
Exactly. And at the end of the day, it's not just about protecting nature. It's about realizing that we depend on a healthy planet for our own well-being.
It all goes back to that interconnectedness. We're all part of this web of life. And what we do, it affects everything.
Understanding ecosystems as complex adaptive systems, that's really the key. It helps us see those connections, the feedback loops, the incredible resilience of nature, but it also shows us that resilience has limits.
So we can't just assume that nature will always bounce back no matter what we do to it.
Exactly. We have to act with intention, with awareness and with respect for the balance of life. The future of our planet, our own future, it depends on that.
That's a really powerful message. As we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with something to think about. We've talked about how ecosystems are always adapting, always changing. So how can we as humans become more adaptable too? How can we change our behaviors, our systems, our whole way of thinking? To become better caretakers of this planet, it's a question worth asking ourselves, and one that we all have a part in answering. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into ecosystems as complex adaptive systems. Keep exploring, keep learning, and we'll see you next time.